Hello once again to followers of Outsell's Futurescape video blog. Today I have the great pleasure of welcoming the CEO of Shimmr AI, that is Nadim Sadek. And Nadim, I know that we have spoken before, but I have been monitoring, and I think many other people have been monitoring the progress of Shimmr AI since its launch now about a year ago. And since then, it's important to us to catch up on your progress, but also to get into the background of what brought you into AI, what impact you think AI is having, both upon the exemplar of publishing, which you are using at the moment, but also perhaps in the wider world. Welcome then to you, Nadim, and please be open up for us by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about how you came to be doing this.
Well, what a lovely introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. Indeed, Shimmr launched about 11 months ago, and I'll obviously tell you about that at the appropriate point in our chat. My background, which I have to say I think has influenced my career a lot, so I'll dwell on it as briefly as I can, is multifaceted. I was born half Irish, half Egyptian. And more or less the moment I was born, my father took a job as an epidemiologist in the World Health Organization, which involved us chasing plagues and pestilence all around the world, from cholera to yellow fever and all the rest of it. So I had the, at that time, unusual experience of, going to school in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, then into Asia, where I went to school in Malaysia and lived in Indonesia as well. Then moved to the Caribbean, and we lived in Barbados and Antigua. I eventually went to school in Dublin and went to university at Trinity, where I studied psychology. And from psychology, I went into consumer psychology, and that began the first phase of my career, which was in consumer insight, where I learned to analyze brands and to understand the motivations of people and actually how one might manipulate them with products, with packaging, with advertising. And I say that both unashamedly and with some shame, because exploitation and manipulation are not really great things, but it is a whole industry out there that I became part of. I did that for a while. I eventually founded a company in London that became the biggest of its type in the world, which I sold to WPP, a big advertising group. I ran a couple of networks globally. And then I kind of quit the industry, to be honest. I'd kind of done my time in consumer insight. And with some of my ill-gotten gains, I bought an island off the west coast of Ireland. People always go, what a ridiculous thing to do. It was indeed, but it was also fantastic. and there I couldn't resist turning my hand to brands again, but this time it wasn't in analyzing them. It was actually making stuff, which I found exhilarating. So I started a horse stud, which was a complete disaster. Never did that again. I just didn't understand that horses kept procreating, and you end up with 50 horses in the field, which you could do nothing with. Instead, and more successfully, I started a whiskey brand, a food brand, and a music brand, and we did all those things on the island. We in part and in different ways produced those things. We had musicians on the island. We wrote books on the island. We partly contributed to the whiskey. The sand that went into making the bottles was gathered from the beaches. It was all romantic and absolutely fabulous. So rather than analyze brands, I hope. It was fantastic whiskey. It was 10-year-old.
Well done.
And it was wonderful. So the second phase was really understanding how to make brands and manage them, which involved marketing, advertising, all sorts of other things, and employed some of my past. And then after 10 years or so of that, I thought, well, actually, there's a load of people out there who are trying to do good things with their own enterprises, but they often fail with their brands or their marketing. And rather than trying and hire the best caliber people, what if we could employ AI? I was fascinated by data science. And with AI, create a sort of chief marketing officer in your pocket that you could subscribe to, and we would analyze all the characteristics of your market and your competitors and your budgets and all the rest of it, and we would give you action plans that would drive your brands. We did that. The company was very successful. It was sold a couple of years ago. And I kind of then inadvertently, had gone consumer insight, brand creation and management, and then into AI brand management. And I didn't quite want to give up the AI part of it. And I collided the notions that I'd really enjoyed on the island, which was making things, with the new things I discovered, which was how to use AI, all wrapped around in a bit of psychology and consumer insight and advertising. And so Shimmr was born to be an automated advertising platform that would allow any industry with a deep inventory and a discoverability challenge to be able to surface their things, their assets that they've invested in, their products and their goods and their services, that have kind of languished in the dark because traditional advertising models would never allow a kind of low margin, low budget, low revenue product to have its own advertising campaign. And in that sense, we are a disruption to the advertising agency, the advertising world, and that industry in particular. It's $1 trillion industry, so it's a big old thing that we're working on.
You feel they won't feel the impact too badly?
I think we're a very small minnow at the moment that will suddenly become a terrible, I don't know, a terrible moss all over previously glistening stones.
I love the advertising line on your website, which said that you allowed the book to discover the audience rather than the audience to discover the book, and that seemed to me to be a fascinating way of encapsulating something of what this technology is about.
I think it's great that you relied upon that, because it's a subtle but really profound change in the way that books are marketed and advertised. I must give credit to Porter Anderson, who's the editor-in-chief of Publishing Perspectives, because when he first talked to me, he said, you were doing reverse discoverability. I said, what's that, Porter? He said, every book finds its audience, and he's very generously, without royalty, allowed us to use the line ever since. But it's true, what we do with our machines is essentially read the book with, of course, the permission of the publisher and whoever holds the copyright. And that reading the book never goes into the training set of a large language model or anything else. It's hermetically sealed off. We read the book in order to extract what we call its BookDNA, which is a psychological profile of the book, as well as an understanding of its narrative structure and all the rest of it. That unique fingerprint becomes the brief that we use to identify what the best-selling strategy would be for the book. That becomes the brief for us generating the creative assets, the ads, in other words. And then finally, it's also used, that BookDNA, to know who the audience would be that we should match the advertising to, and in which channels. So if you take a silly example like, a book about fishing for mackerel in Sweden, well, as I said that, you pictured something. That was probably the first, most rudimentary ad you could have. But because the BookDNA does a much more subtle and nuanced understanding of it, when it reads the book, it understands that the principal theme might actually be melancholy, depression, and cruelty. So it's a bit of a weird book. There are subsidiary themes of family loyalty, sustainable living, ambition, and nature. And so the generator, the second of our machines that takes the brief from the first one, the analyzer, says, okay, well, I'll make all of those campaigns, but I'll start with the first melancholy, depressing, cruel one with salmon, with mackerel fishing in Sweden. And it produces that set of ads. And then it says, where will I find those people? And it talks to Google and it talks to Meta and it identifies those audiences. So it brings the very essence of the book and matches them to the people who will be susceptible to it and who will have a predilection for the things that it contains. So it's kind of, I don't pretend that there's any nobility to our cause, but I think it's fantastic that AI has said, I can figure out the nuances and subtleties of this book, manifest them in a way that people can grasp instantly and decide whether they're interested or not, and then make it available to them in e-commerce, showing it to the people that are most likely to want to get it. So it's a highly efficient system that's with using effective assets to match readers and books. starting with a book, not starting with a reader. And historically, of course, everybody said, well, housewives 25 to 40 in Texas, what do they like? Let's send them these books. We just do it. We take no notice of demographics or previous history. We just say, we know that you're interested in these things, and here's a book that has that for you. So how about a match here? And it's working very well.
Yes. Well, I think that's wonderful. Just qualify for me can you describe for me? It is working very well. I notice you have a pretty wonderful list of clients on your website. The message is getting out there in the London, in the British market, yes, elsewhere. How are things really going?
Well, we launched 11 months ago, and we have nearly 200 customers. I think I couldn't be more delighted with that. I mean, if we had 2 million, well, that's more delightful. but actually, kind of being serious about what you can expect from a sometimes conservative industry that is a little wary of too quickly embracing new technology and so on. I think we've done fabulously well, and I have to say that our customers come from right across the spectrum of mom and pop publishers all the way up to the biggest enterprise ones. They've embraced us. We're principally focused first in the trade area rather than in academic, but we will be going there too. So just in terms of kind of revenue generation and relationships with the publishing industry, I think we've done very well. Our revenues are about 65% in the States already. The rest pretty well in the UK, but we have smidgens here and there in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Canada, classic English-speaking markets, but also some Indian publishers who are sending their books to be sold in the US and the UK markets. So we're really more focused on where the books are sold than where they come from in terms of our business model. And we anticipate, once we've optimized our product, which is not optimized, and I'll be perfectly humble about that in a second, but once we've optimized it properly, we'll go into every language. There's no reason for us not to operate in Mandarin and Spanish and Arabic and Portuguese. So we'll do it globally as soon as we're ready.
Yeah.
Would you like humility about product note?
Well, yes. Let's have some humility. That's always good at this stage in a conversation.
Our product doesn't work for every book. It's as simple as that. And the reality is we do automated advertising. We don't do magic. And there are some reasons why books don't sell. I mean, the first one is they're not very good. The second one is often that their selling environment is absolutely not optimized. So you've got poor reviews or no reviews or awkward pages or, the things which just kind of hamper people acting on their impulse or their match and just saying, well, actually, no, I think I'll buy something else. It might be too expensive compared to another competitor they see listed alongside it. There are a lot of variables which we can't control that cause our advertising to bring people to the point of willingness to purchase and then balking at it and not continuing. There are other books which our advertising just doesn't do a very good job on. There's no rhyme or reason to that yet. As we get even more volume, perhaps there will be, but we can't identify that by genre or anything else. But what we tend to favor, and the books which have characteristics that do well with us, tend to be ones which have been in the backlist and are selling already at the rate of about 15 to 30 copies a month. So, they're alive. There's a demand for them. There's a circulation of them. Rather than taking one which has sold a copy in the last year or three, and where we're asked to kind of revive it, that's much harder. And I think also, we have a very long backlog, as it's called in SaaS technology, of product optimizations we want to do. We're going to move into video. It's not really industrially productized yet for us to be able to do that. We're going to go onto different platforms. So we're looking at Pinterest and Reddit. We're principally now in Meta and Google, for example. But we'll work on LinkedIn and everywhere else where there are audiences with whom we could match.
Yeah.
and I think our creative output will also. There's an interesting point about the creative output, which I'd like to dwell on just for a second. You know, advertising agencies typically have a house style. Sometimes brands have a very imposing brand style. What we chose to do was to impose neither of those things, and instead to say every book speaks with its own voice. Because we use AI and it gets this unique DNA fingerprint, we allow every campaign to be absolutely a high fidelity manifestation of what's between the covers of that book. And that will cause us over time fantastically to have really different looking advertising for every single book. At the moment, that is not true about our campaigns, because we deliberately throttle the AI's creativity in order to produce. One of the hardest things with AI at the moment is to be deterministic, which means that you tell it what to do and you will get what you asked for. Very, very often current users of AI try to get something completely unpredicted. So we have managed to engineer determinism into our system that allows our engines to produce what we want them to produce. That means some throttling of their creativity. But as the months go on, we're going to unthrottle that, and we'll get more and more spectacular and really palpably different advertising campaigns for different books, which I'm thrilled about.
Excellent. That sounds really interesting. Now, let me just direct you onto a slightly different topic, if I may.
Sure.
Here you've made this start with Shimmr. You obviously have plans for its further development and for building it further in the book publishing world. I, as the author of several modestly selling books, would warmly welcome that effort. But I do remember the example of Amazon. And how Amazon used the variety and difficulty of the book publishing marketplace, with all of its uniqueness, product DNA, as you've called it, to build systems which then took them into other areas of retailing very quickly. Is that in your mind, or are you looking to build a vertical specialization? And then what is the wider implication? You spoke earlier, and the phrase stuck in my head about the chief marketing officer in your pocket. And despite the fact that you were corrected and talked about advertising, is there still a dream there? Unveil, please, Nadim.
Lovely, sophisticated questions. Let me start with the kind of vertical specialization. We are currently uniquely specializing in book publishing. And I think the future of Shimmr, it's a strange notion perhaps, will be to be multi-vertical specialists. Let me tell you why that is, because there's a couple of characteristics that we need for our technology to be right. One is, does it have a deep inventory? Are there loads of things which otherwise wouldn't see the light of day? Second, are those things characterized by what I call a kind of deep psychological dimension? Are there things to work out about the products that are languishing in the dark, in the long tail of these industries? And the third one is, do they sell principally online? So, for example, we could go into wine. You know, if you talk to people about wine, do you like red or white? I prefer red. Which country? Oh, I prefer Spanish, not Italian or French. Do you like Rioja, or is it a different region? Within Rioja, which territories, appeal to you? Is there a family that you like? Do they have a particular viniculture that you, and it goes on and on and on. The more there's those layers of understanding that we can set our AI to work on to understand the unique DNA of that product, the more we can produce faithfully interesting, differentiated campaigns for each of the products, and therefore consumers, people who want to get involved with this, have well-informed, seductive and persuasive campaigns to navigate through and to understand their choices. So I think it's quite likely that other creative industries will come into our ambit. Podcasts, there are many, and they're quite hard to navigate. Movies, music, certainly, possibly video games. So I think the same broad technology that we employ currently uniquely in book publishing, where we analyze the DNA, generate a high fidelity campaign, and deploy it with a psychologically matched audience, that can be made true in many different verticals. I think most likely first with other creative industry ones, then perhaps a bit more broadly. And the funny thing is, your reference to Amazon, I can foresee Amazon saying, well, actually, couldn't we have your ads for everything that's for sale on Amazon? Same with eBay. You list something. Could there be a Shimmr button for every lister on eBay to press and say, could I have my own mini campaign, please? For another euro or whatever of listing fees, and we could generate that. That's in the future. But I think the way that we would be multi-vertical specialists, just to finish this notion, is that we would always have a team that was specialized in book publishing or in wine or in video games, and that would truly, just immerse itself in all the characteristics and dynamics of that market. I wouldn't like to have a kind of blunderbuss technology that just had to go in every vertical without really knowing what it was doing.
Yeah, needs to be tuned.
Yeah.
Good. That's absolutely excellent. And sadly, we've come to the end of our time slot. But we need to check back with you, Nadim, and find out what the next year produces. In the meanwhile, very, very good fortune with Shimmr, and I hope your plans as you mature the product all come through. And thank you once again for cooperating today and giving us an insight into a live, active, and very brilliant AI project in the book publishing industry. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, David. And genuinely, it's an honor to do this with you. You are famous and infamous, and I've loved the opportunity of talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.